Indeed, a great honor and privilege for me to welcome you all to yet another robust session. Such a long journey, Women in New India. Sunita Krishnan in conversation with Neha Dixit. We are honored to have these two remarkable women with us today. Sunita Krishnan is the founder of Prajwala, Asia's the largest institution combating sex trafficking. A Padma Shri awardee and one of Newsweek magazine's 150 fearless women in the world, she has been instrumental in drafting India's first anti-trafficking policy and leading the survival aid campaign Suraksha, impacting over 1 million lives across the country. Joining her is Neha Dixit, an award-winning journalist with over 17 years of experience covering politics, gender, and social justice. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, Al Jazeera. Neha has earned numerous awards and accolades, including International Press Freedom Award at the Kamali Devi Jain Award for Outstanding Women Journalist 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sunita Krishnan and Neha Dixit for this powerful session.
Should we wait? Do you guys want to move up a bit? Don't worry, we'll not ask you questions. It will just be nicer and more intimate if you move up a little bit. Okay. So backbencher syndrome, huh? Okay. Sunita, they just talked about how you were known as the most fierce, one of the fiercest women. I would say you were one of the fiercest people around and not just a woman, right? So let's open up this conversation. Just before the session we were talking about how a lot of us as women, because we do some work, we are reduced to just being identified as one woman doing something in the corner, but we are not really that. I was just cribbing and venting that despite reporting on several things like police encounter or trafficking or corruption or politics, each time I'm introduced somewhere, I'm just introduced as this is Neha Dixit and she writes on women's issues. And similarly, Sunita was also talking about how when people have a conversation with her, it's only about what her personal experience has been or what she has faced, but not about what all work she has done in all these years. So Sunita, would you want to talk about how, what has been your struggle? You've also mentioned that in your book. And as a woman, you as a woman and us as women in this world, how have we moved forward?
Namaskaram. Namaskaram, Kozhikode. Lovely to be here. ഇത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഉപ്പുമാങ്ങ കഴിക്കാനുള്ള വളരെ തിടുക്കുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ മലയാളത്തിൽ എനിക്ക് സംസാരിക്കാൻ പറ്റൂല because Neha does not understand Malayalam, so I will stick to English.
I'm trying to learn and I'll say Namaskaram with Sneham and Premam, but next time when I meet you, I'll learn more.
It's been a long journey, but it also is a long journey ahead. We have very, very long to go before we reach a point where we are equitable, we are recognized and accepted for what we are and what we have accomplished, and not for the various construct and narratives that are stuck to us. Somehow, I think, especially with women, we are constantly reduced, oh, being a woman, you're doing this, or oh, you've gotten through this, and that's why you're doing this. So much so that I have had a situation where a lived experience of my life has become my lifelong identity. So no matter how many years passes by, people say, oh, you are that, and that is how you've reached here. So yeah, there's a long way for us to go before we are accepted and acknowledged for our accomplishments as we as persons, we as human beings, what we have done and what we have contributed. And for that, Neha, in many ways, I think the way we are investing our time has to be questioned. At one end, we are talking about empowerment of women, and we think about building, creating an enabling environment for women to access opportunities, women to empower themselves, and women to, realize their full potential. That is half the humanity. The other half, we don't invest at all, the men and boys, We don't invest in building their capacities to handle this empowerment. So several narrative about women and narrative and construct and stereotypes stick on because half the humanity continues to be the carrier of that. And things will change when we invest both sides, As much as one side has to be lifted up, another side has to be, capacitated to handle this empowerment. And that is where stereotypes will fall, constructs will fall, and things like that. But Neha, you have written a book, The Journey of Saida, and you have chronicled the journey of a average Indian woman, the millions who are not known thing. But that is the story of each of the women thing. What do you think? How far have we come?
First of all, thank you for that, because we were talking about how a lot of us have been having these conversations on how everything is about empowering women, which is absolutely important. But I feel that, and many of us feel that there simultaneously needs to be something needs to be done to enable the men to be able to deal with the empowered women. Because that is why there is so much of resistance, the kind of violence that we see around us, the kind of patriarchy that we want to question. So you see, for instance, I see so many people sitting here, so many women sitting here. At home, we are kind of trying to always fight, and not fight, but at least push the boundaries that I want to wear this, or I want to go out and do this work. I want to go to college, do this. I want to choose this career. I want to choose my partner. And so those things are there, but there is a lot of resistance, which is why we see violence. The fact that, in North India, you must have heard about honor killings. There were so many honor killings because people were choosing their own partners. But at the same time, one would say that that was also because so many people were resisting and asserting themselves, and women were asserting themselves. In my book also, the book is about a person who's a peace rate worker. I don't know if you're familiar with peace rate workers. So in India, most of the women are employed in the agricultural sector. But after that, most of the work that women do is they do this peace rate work where they're paid per 12 dozen things that they make, per 144 pieces that they make. And so earlier there were factories, but now a lot of that work, because the factory owners, as the new revenue model, they want to save money, not give adequate wages, not give a physical space. So they outsource this work to peace rate workers. So Saida is a peace rate worker. But through her, I've tried to talk about how, like for instance, before 2012 as a journalist, each time I would pitch a story on sexual violence, it was so normalized and people were so desensitized that you couldn't do a story on it. But after that, when there was scope because of the anti-rape movement, we started pitching stories and we were doing stories on sexual violence. But now if you see, they are done. Most news organizations want to do it, but want to do it in a very sensational, typical way and in a very episodic way, as if that is the only thing that happens in a woman's life. There's life before and after. And so in that situation, when the media is so corporate and there are profits, and so which is why we were told, okay, don't talk about these bleeding heart stories and these Jholawala stories, talk about what the urban rich people are facing. So in that situation, Saida, who's a pay straight worker and who's never able to make more than 1/5 of the daily wage, what is the space for her? What is it that she faces? And along with her, millions of women who are doing this work, how are they navigating that space? So for example, I think I was just telling you about it. For example, Saida, because she's only making 70, 80 rupees a day, and if you speak to a lot of pay straight workers, women, lowly paid, the struggle is whether today I manage to buy groceries and milk for my children or be able to report the kind of sexual harassment I'm facing. And so, which is why she has a very rehearsed, tutored, politically incorrect response where she has a same patriarchal response saying it depends on the woman. So we also have to see who are the women who actually have the space to voice out and assert, and whether they have adequate situations to be able to talk and push and resist the way we would like people to be able to do.
But you know, in so many ways, Neha, we are stuck in the dark ages. The last few years, apart from my core work of fighting human trafficking and sex trafficking and removing girls from the worst of exploitation that one can imagine, I've also been exploring another part of our own country, where in more than 9 states, witch hunting is still practiced. You have women who, because they are empowered, because who choose to say, you know, I want to go to school, or who are assertive, or who say, I will not do this, or who will say a no with capital N-O, your sexual advances I say no to, immediately branded as a witch. Now, what does branding as a witch means? It means publicly humiliated, a whole community, you know, becoming a big gang in open daylight, you know, publicly disrobing her, dragging her by the hair. I believe if they are given excreta to eat, the witchness will be removed. So this woman is made to eat human excreta in bhari public, and practically 1 out of 3 is killed, not by one person, by a mob of 300-400.
So can I interrupt you and ask you another question while you're talking about witch hunting? Because property rights for women is a key component behind witch hunting. So if you can also talk about that.
Absolutely, and that is one of the things when I started this phenomenon, I started understanding this phenomenon. You know, it was a range of issues, you know, and at the core of it was property issues and property disputes. But the fact that woman, as the owner of a property, a custodian of a property, was something that was not acceptable. Would they do that to a man? No. Because she is owning the property, she is single, okay, and she is kind of asserting her rights to what she has and her choices of a thing, now brands her as a person who has to be not only sidelined but banished from the world per se. So somewhere, you know, this entire question of empowerment is not common for all of us. Many of us sitting here, we're all from a privileged class, and we need to recognize our privileges. There are millions out there like our Saida and many others who are navigating through survival to, you know, empower themselves. And then there are also millions others, unknown, unsung, unheard, who are getting killed, either in witch hunting or in honor killing or as sex slaves in exploitation. We're not talking about 1, 2, 3, 4. We're talking about millions. And there is a silence, the silence of the privileged, both men and women. And that is also something that we need to question. Our silence in tolerating what has been centuries old of patriarchal dogma that each one of us are carrying, not just women. The men carry it too. And that is why I started my conversation by saying that empowerment is not just about women. Like women's safety is not about women. Women's safety is about men. You know, every time a rape happens, everybody is running towards the girls. Come on, let's learn karate, let's learn taekwondo, give them a pepper spray. What are we teaching our daughters? What are we teaching our sisters? Be scared. You know, always be on the guard. Look this side, look this side. Anybody does that, come on, take out your karate shot. This is what we're teaching. We're not teaching her to be free. We are not teaching her to be, you can walk with, confidence that nobody will touch you. And until and unless you don't invest in men and boys, and that's why I felt very sad when all these little boys who were sitting right in front, moved out of the first session and they all en masse walked off. My heart took a, beat. I said, I wish all of them were to hear here, because I believe if in true sense we talk about women's empowerment and we talk about the journey ahead, we need to also strategize differently. It is not just the women we need to empower. We need to empower our men and boys. Not only to handle the empowerment, but also to think differently, view differently. Kerala is a state that we are sitting here now. And there are enough and more, and I don't want to go because I think we are also now coming closer to the time that we have to give the audience to speak, ask questions. But, you will see here the really in recent incidents that has happened. At one end you will see women coming forward, people in very public space, in the space of glamour industry, film industry, coming forward to talking about what has happened to them and actually filing cases and things like that. And then there is another side who's sitting and making judgment of this own woman. And I was shocked. I was seeing a YouTube video of this young man and who spoke very, very positively in the beginning. And then he said everything, reinforcing the mindset of the society.
But Sunita, you spoke about privilege. And that also is about, we talk about intersectionality quite a bit. So there is, until unless we make this conversation on women and empowerment and usually gender equality, it has to look at the caste, class intersections, religious intersections. The women that you speak about who are being witch hunted, a lot of them are from indigenous communities. Or the fact that Saida, in my book, she's a working class Muslim woman who, despite working and doing everything, because of the larger socio-political environment and majoritarian environment, is continuously affected by it. And then comes to the other bit, which is also the fact that how each time any conversation about gender is just in one corner. And the fact is that basically everybody needs to have a gender lens. If you are discussing the aviation budget, it also has a gender lens. If you're discussing railway budget, there is also gender lens. And so a lot of times we laugh in newsrooms because each time the union budget is about to come out and reporters go and ask women, oh, how is this going to affect your grocery budget? As if women have nothing to say about what is happening with the railways or sports, or if you're introducing a smart cities project that also has a gender component. So the fact that there is no gender lens and the limitation of looking at gender as only harassment, problem, something on the ground, menstrual health. Now there is a lot of conversation about period leave, but no conversation about gender pay gap, for example, right? So because those are complex things, it's very easy to say, yeah, there shouldn't be any violence on women. But the moment the onus is on you to also give equal wages based on people's gender, then there is more accountability, and most of the time people don't want to do that.
It's because it's very convenient for us to put things in silos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now women's issue, only women come and sit in this hall. All the men go away. The topic is on women, so only women should hear. Women's Day program, only women come and sit.
Yeah.
And a women chief guest will call. So we are making it convenient for us to be continuous carriers of gender stereotypes, which has come with a patriarchal thinking. So until and unless we don't break that, and somewhere we need to make a start from there. I think, Neha, we must open the
Yes,
floor
absolutely.
for people to. I
Yeah.
love this conversation
Yeah.
with you,
Yeah.
but we were, I think, told by them
Yes.
that 10 minutes. But
10 minutes.
sorry, guys, we have taken 2.5 minutes of your time.
I just wanted to say, I was just telling Sunita that the other bit about we are having these conversations, both of our books have come out, we are going to LitFest and speaking about it. The other day at some LitFest, some man walked up to me and said, "Oh, your smile is very beautiful, so I bought your book." So no matter what we do, we write books, we do reporting, whatever Sunita is doing, we are still reduced to how we look and what we do. So that's also something that
Which
needs
means
to be-
my smile was not so good. That is why nobody brought my book, because of my smile. And I'm going to give a Colgate smile now so that people can buy.
Okay,
So let's
so
open the
questions,
floor
yeah.
for conversations with the audience. Please use the mic. Whoever is handling the mic, there's a lady right here.
Hi, ma'am. My very first question is, you talked about the social construct and patriarchal privileges. There are women who carries out
Keep the mic closer.
okay. There are women who got the entire privileges of patriarchy and still judge women. How can we tackle that? My question is that. The second question is, do you find any role of caste in these gender issues?
So whom are you asking the question? To both of us
Yeah.
or one of us?
The first question is for you, ma'am. Then second question is for you.
Okay. Answer.
Okay, for the first question, of course, because patriarchy is a system. It's not men versus women. Often people look at it in like that. In a patriarchal system, whoever holds power, and because it operates like that, which is why a lot of women can also be patriarchal. A lot of men can also be feminists. So that is something that we need to constantly look at. And it's also a patriarchal tool to say, women are the worst enemies of women. But so are men are also worst enemies of men. But that is not we don't put it out like that. But it's a patriarchal system. People who hold power, we are all fighting against patriarchy. So it's actually not women versus men at all.
It's a thought process. Anybody can carry it, men or women. Coming to your caste issue, of course, caste plays a thing. If you look at our social hierarchies, who's the most marginalized, who's the most disempowered, who's got the least access to opportunities and entitlements, it would be definitely coming to some caste or other. So, woman goes through a double-edged sword, not just as a woman, but also from the caste that she belongs to. Most young women who are sold for prostitution or witch hunted are either from the indigenous groups or the tribals or from SC/ST communities. So, and it goes for most of the things. So, what happens in the society at large automatically permeates into all forms of violence too. Who is the most vulnerable? Who is the most weak? Caste, class, gender, religion.
Thank you.
Could you make sure that your question is short and you tell whom you're asking?
Yeah. My question is to both of you. I would love to hear both of your thoughts. So I come from a privileged background, and I'm surrounded by men who come from privileged backgrounds as well. And your thought around how we need to empower men as well to deal with women empowerment and to have the capacity to think differently. My question is, how do you communicate with men from the privileged background who are seeing only privileged women around them to think differently and to, I guess, feel empowered with not taking it personally and getting defensive when this conversation comes up?
I think privilege is a great asset in understanding. When you have privileges, you have the privilege of thought. You have the privilege of analyzing a thought. And the privileged class could be the torch bearers of alternate thinking because they don't have to struggle for survival. Like, Saida in her book is struggling to survive. So, in that she cannot think, how should I be better parent? But a privileged class does not have that struggle, and therefore you can afford to analyze. And it means analyzing all those thought process in our own small thing like our own families. which is perpetuating a patriarchal thinking. Maybe start from blue is for boys and pink is for girls, or doll for girls and guns for boys. Start re-looking at that. Instead of telling a girl, come on, learn cooking, tell a boy also to learn cooking and a girl also to learn plumbing and fixtures. So several thought process, we can change it by a different socialization and a cultural communication, and the privileged class has the power to do that. And once they do it, it starts a trend for others also to emulate.
I think the most important bit about privilege in the world that we are living in is that anybody who has any kind of privilege should be able to part with that privilege and let go of the power. And like you said, not be defensive. So for the fact that I am a middle class, upper caste person sitting here talking in English, I do have a privilege. And if somebody is pointing that out, I will acknowledge that that privilege is there without getting defensive. And my situation as a woman may be different, and that privilege also changes according to the situation where you're in. As a woman, as a maybe I don't have the gender privilege, but as a caste privilege, nobody's ever walked up to me or practiced any kind of caste discrimination with me because I am upper caste. So I can't deny that. So I think first thing, whether it's gender, caste, class, anything, we all, not just men, everybody, all of us need to have some sort of training and work on ourselves to be able to acknowledge that we have privilege, and if we have power, to let go, stand aside, step aside, let other people come and talk about it, take leadership, show us the path.
You have 43 seconds
Any more questions?
to ask.
Yeah, I have. Actually, media have by its nature also, it's a patriarchal nature. So it have a significant role to portraying women as a soft target. So as a media person, what's your observations and experience about this?
Portray who? Portray people
As a soft target, like
soft target.
and it's reinforcing some gender stereotypical things also. So what's your observations and experience about as a media person?
Yeah. The most common example is each time there is gender-based violence, what are the illustrations or pictures that are being shown? Women are sitting like this or crouching like this or covering their face as if, all those stereotypes are perpetuated. Or the fact that when we talk about a migrant worker, the picture or the illustration or the video that goes is of a man. So it's never a migrant woman, right? So those are the things that are constantly put out. Or the fact that I keep talking about it and laughing about it, that there was a time when I was working with a television news channel and we were told that, so I was in the investigations team, we were told we have to do stories for male techies in Bangalore, urban rich people and blah, 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 blah. And I had just come back after doing a story on farmer suicides in Bundelkhand, where people had taken their lives for not being able to pay a debt of 15,000, 20,000 rupees. And the only feedback I got from my editor was that why was I not in pants and jackets and done up my hair and face while doing the PTC. So within the media also, you see so many Me Too cases that came in 2018 within Indian media. And there was no redressals, because media space is also the same patriarchal world that we are speaking about. So the same patriarchy exists inside, the same kind of sexism exists inside. And so which is why there's no conscious effort to think of public interest and gender equality as something that is supreme and that needs to be tackled at every level. And which is why stereotypes are constantly there. Even recently that Saif Ali Khan stabbing, look at the kind of reports that Kareena Kapoor was out with her friends partying while he was... So why are we putting these things out? Because we're constantly moralizing this, just like the state, the media also moralizes, puts those stereotypes about how women should be pure and be a certain way.
We also consume that, right? Yeah. We, the consumers, are also asking for those things. I mean, our whole mind is working on, why didn't Kareena go with her husband to the thing? What a bad wife she is. So I think, everything is interconnected. What is there and what we are demanding for. It reflects in the kind of movies that become blockbusters. It reflects in the kind of web series which is watched by everybody else. It reflects in the kind of stories, because stories will sell only if you buy it, right? So you're also wanting that kind of stereotypes to continue. So I think the change starts from each one of us as men and women to think differently and think alternatively.
And I also want to add structurally. Structural change is required. So if there is within news organizations, if there's structural change that you cannot, if you put this visual out, there'll be some kind of action taken against you, and which is why it's going to change.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you.